I told my daughter to cancel her marriage. Now her fiancé's family hates me. My daughter is 27, and she'd been with her boyfriend for 7 years before they got engaged. I always liked him, he seemed kind, respectful, and he treated my daughter well. We'd even met his parents a couple of times, and while they were polite enough, they struck me as a bit old-fashioned. They asked my wife things like why she was working and mentioned how the mother should be at home with the children. I brushed it off, thinking it was just their way. When my daughter and her fiancé started planning their wedding, things seemed to be going smoothly until her fiancé asked me to come over to his parents' house for a serious talk. I thought it would be about wedding plans, but I was wrong. His parents started talking about a dowry, saying it was tradition and that my daughter would be a stay-at-home wife. I was stunned. I told them dowries were outdated and that we had no plans for that sort of thing. They weren't happy, and they asked me not to mention it to my daughter. Of course, the first thing I did when I got home was tell her everything. She was heartbroken, saying she had no idea her fiancé or his family felt that way. She asked me what she should do, and I told her she wasn't obligated to marry anyone if she wasn't comfortable. I wasn't trying to pressure her, I just wanted her to know she had options. In the end, she decided to call off the engagement. Now her ex-fiancé's family is furious with me, saying I robbed him of the love of his life. Some of my daughter's friends even told me I was a bad father for meddling and ruining what would have been a happy marriage. But honestly, I'm just glad she saw their true colors before it was too late. So, am I really the bad guy for telling my daughter the truth? Or did I just help her dodge a bullet? Sometimes, dodging a bullet isn't just luck, it's knowing when to walk away before things get worse. Next, we go from family drama to roommate chaos. When boundaries get crossed and accusations fly, sometimes the only answer is to pack your bags and move on. I moved out mid-lease after my roommate's girlfriend accused me of being creepy. I've been living with my roommate for 2 years now. I'm actually subletting from him, and it's been on a month-to-month basis for the past year. We had a verbal agreement that I'd stay until the end of the year, and I didn't think much of it, it felt pretty solid. Then his girlfriend moved in at the start of the year, and things started to change. Apparently, she's got some trauma from a home invasion a few years back. I never pried, but my roommate laid down some ground rules so she'd feel more comfortable. He said I couldn't talk to her if he wasn't around, not even casual chit-chat. He also mentioned that I should try not to be in the same room as her, like if she's cooking in the kitchen, I should wait until she's done. I thought it was a bit extreme, but I went along with it. It was his place, after all. But it got worse. With all of us working from home, it became nearly impossible to avoid her. I'd do my best to keep my distance, but occasionally I'd slip up. One time, I came back from Costco with a few too many bottles of coconut water. I offered her one just to be polite, but apparently, that was a huge mistake. That night, my roommate pulled me aside to lecture me about how she'd never drink something I offered and how I shouldn't be interacting with her. I thought it was weird, but I brushed it off. Then, there was the Game of Thrones incident. She was watching it in the living room, and I happened to catch a funny scene while walking by. I laughed, and she jumped, looking up to see me standing behind her. My roommate flipped out later that evening, accusing me of creeping on her and making her uncomfortable. That was my breaking point. A friend of mine just told me about a cheap place that opened up, and I jumped on it. I let my roommate know I was moving out, and he was furious. He said I was leaving him high and dry, forcing him to cover the full rent even though I'd promised to stay. I did feel a little guilty since we had an agreement, but honestly, I was done with walking on eggshells in my own home. Now he's calling me selfish for bailing, but I think I made the right call. Am I really the bad one here? Or did I just finally put my own comfort first? Sometimes you have to put your own peace of mind first, even if it means breaking promises. Now, imagine offering someone a place to stay, only for them to hand you a bill for extra services. Yeah, this next one is a real eye-opener. I booted my sister after she hit me with a surprise invoice. Am I in the wrong? My sister showed up needing a place to stay, and since I've got plenty of room in my house, I let her move in. She wasn't working or bringing in any income, so I thought it was fair to give her $100 each week for groceries and to help out around the place. A little while later, she handed me a breakdown of additional services she'd done walking my dog in the afternoons, even though I already handled morning and evening walks, at $25 a pop, plus a fancy scrapbook of family letters she'd put together. According to her math, that added up to another $200 on top of what I was already giving her. I reminded her I'd never asked for those extras, and she snapped back that it was all part of keeping the house clean. That felt like a raw deal. Money isn't the problem for me, I have plenty of disposable income, but I was shocked by how entitled she sounded. When she insisted I was ripping her off, I told her I wouldn't pay for unsolicited chores or crafts, and I asked her to move out. In the end, I kicked her out for billing me for stuff I never agreed to, because it wasn't about the cash, it was about respect and clear boundaries. Setting boundaries isn't always easy, but sometimes it's the only way to remind people of what respect really means. Next up, we switch gears to a classroom showdown where one student finally stood up to months of hurtful comments, and it did not end quietly. I clapped back at a classmate's racist taunts. Did I go too far? I'm a freshman in college, and there's this girl in my English class who's been throwing subtle racial jabs at me ever since we met last year. She'd send offhand messages complaining about how unfair life is since her uncle caught COVID, and somehow that made everything her fault, or so she'd argue. On the very first day of the new semester, she came up behind me in the cafeteria while I was eating lunch. Without missing a beat, she sneered that I had crooked teeth, that I lived way out in a trailer, and that my family must be broke. It stung, because I'd always been self-conscious about my smile and where I come from. I'll admit, I let my anger get the best of me. Instead of calmly setting a boundary or walking away, I looked her right in the eye and unloaded every insult I could think of, calling out her own flaws, mocking her pretentious attitude, and suggesting she'd never understand real struggle. I even joked about how she'd probably cry at the drop of a hat. She did cry. Big, messy tears right there in front of half the cafeteria. My chest tightened as I heard her sobbing. A dozen classmates stared, mouths agape. In that moment, I realized I'd gone way beyond a comeback. I'd humiliated her. Later that night, I scrolled through the class group chat and saw people calling me cruel, saying her upbringing wasn't her fault and I didn't have the right to shame her circumstances. Others reminded me that a perfectly decent person wouldn't respond to harassment with outright cruelty. A few friends urged that I could have handled it differently, maybe talked to her privately or involved an RA. In a perfect world, I guess I would have taken the high road, calmly told her comments were hurtful and asked her to stop. But when someone's been baiting you with racial digs for months, sometimes your patience snaps. So here I am, stuck in a whirlwind of guilt and defensiveness. Did I do the wrong thing by matching her insults blow for blow, or was it fair payback for months of harassment? Am I the bad for making her cry, even though she started it? Sometimes the only way to stand up for yourself is to speak your mind loudly and clearly. Now, we head into a dinner disaster where dietary restrictions were ignored and payback came in the most explosive way possible. I let loose at my fiancé's family dinner, and here's what went down. I've been wondering if I went too far when I deliberately embarrassed myself in front of my future in-laws to prove a point. I follow a mostly plant-based diet, though I do slip in fish or baked chicken now and then. Between lactose intolerance, gluten sensitivity, and irritable bowel syndrome, I'm basically fighting a daily battle to avoid a wardrobe malfunction. Folks often tease me about being a hippie health nut or think I have an eating disorder because I'm slim and can't touch most foods. Even when I politely nibble at dinner, I end up camped out in the bathroom afterward. Last weekend my fiancé and I went to his parents' house for an engagement celebration with his mom, stepdad, younger brother, and grandma. They've known for years that I'm stuck eating rabbit food thanks to my dietary issues. Yet when dinner arrived, they put out a heavily seasoned chicken and sausage jambalaya with cornbread and smothered potatoes, basically everything I can't digest. I felt crushed, like they'd completely ignored my needs, and when my fiancé asked what I could eat, they told me to live a little and put some meat on your bones. I excused myself to the bathroom, and my fiancé offered to leave, but I waved him off because I didn't want to seem high and mighty. I took a small portion out of politeness, and yes, it was insanely good. Less than an hour later, the dreaded rumble hit, one of those moments where you know disaster is about to strike. Instead of trekking across the house, I bolted into the guest bathroom next to the living room and let loose in full dramatic effect. 5 excruciating minutes later, I emerged to mortified faces and a bathroom that smelled like an active volcano. I mumbled an apology, sorry, sensitive stomach, you know how it is, and we cut the visit short. In the car, my fiancé accused me of doing it on purpose to be petty, saying I should have just asked to leave. I wasn't sorry. I reminded him his family knew exactly what I deal with and chose to serve me poison anyway. When people don't respect your boundaries, sometimes you just have to make it unforgettable. Next, we move from awkward dinners to heartbreaking decisions. Imagine keeping your partner's last letter hidden from your child, not out of spite but out of love. I hid my husband's last letter from my daughter, you won't believe why. I never imagined I'd be the guy sitting alone in our living room, clutching my late husband's handwriting like a lifeline. Back in January 2024, my wife and I learned he had a tumor in a part of the brain surgeons couldn't touch, and doctors said he had maybe 6 months left. He shocked everyone by hanging on until October, 3 extra months of fighting, smiling, and planning for our girls. A few weeks after his diagnosis, he decided to write letters to our daughters, notes for every big milestone he knew he might miss. My husband was more than my partner, he was my best friend since childhood. Losing him has felt like losing half of myself. We have 2 girls, Mia, who just turned 22, and Emmy, 18. Grief has a way of bringing you closer, and the 3 of us leaned on each other every day. We'd been together since middle school, tied the knot at 18, and were closing in on our 25th anniversary when he passed. When Mia got married this February, to the same guy she's been dating since high school, I was overjoyed for her. Her new husband has been a rock for our family during this terrible time. My husband's last act of love was a letter addressed specifically for Mia to open on her wedding day. None of us knew those letters existed except me. He wanted it to be my responsibility to hand them over at exactly the right moment. But when that wedding morning came, I couldn't bring myself to give it to her. Reading his words and seeing his handwriting felt like having him there beside me, something I wasn't ready to let slip away. I promised myself I'd hand out all the other letters when each event rolled around, but that first one stayed locked in my drawer. A few days ago, Mia and her husband finally moved into their own place. After they packed up almost everything, she asked where her important papers were, passport, birth certificate, you name it. I casually told her, they're in the top drawer of my dresser. Inside the drawer was only the wedding letter, the rest were tucked out of sight. When she spotted his handwriting on an envelope with her name, she tore it open in tears, hugs, and then anger. She stormed into my room, yelling about how selfish I'd been to keep Dad's last gift all to myself. I didn't have a great answer, so I just told her she could photograph it if she wanted. Both daughters called me bad for hiding their dad's stuff, convinced I was keeping the rest of his letters away from them forever. I'm racked with guilt, but I still can't explain why I was so terrified to let that one slip through my fingers. Grief makes us hold on to things tighter than we should, but letting go isn't always as simple as it seems. Now imagine discovering that someone in your family has been living a double life. This next story? It's a reveal that rocked the entire household. My sister's secret job shocked my entire family. I've been married to an incredible woman who's been a paraplegic since a long ago accident, and she's adapted like a champ. I love her just as much as anyone who can walk, and she never misses a beat in our day-to-day life. From the moment I introduced my sister to my wife, something just felt off. My sister's never warmed up to her. She'd always complain about my wife's attitude or some other vague gripe, but whenever I pressed her for a real reason, she'd dodge the question. I figured people don't have to like everyone they meet, and I didn't press the issue until now. Back in college, my sister worked as a prostitute, and these days she says she does online camming full-time instead of holding a traditional job. She only admitted it because I accidentally discovered her secret once and promised to keep quiet, even telling our parents she worked at a local company. Last week she rang me up asking if I could take a look at her broken sink, since her landlord kept ignoring her requests. I told her I was slammed with our own bathroom remodel. Turns out it's a much bigger job than I signed up for. Without warning, she sneered about my wife, not realizing I'd put the call on speaker and that my wife was sitting right there. My wife was crushed, and I was so upset I snapped at my sister and hung up immediately. After I comforted my wife, I couldn't shake it, so I rang up our parents and laid out exactly what my sister really does for a living. They were grateful I finally told them the truth and promised to handle it from there. Of course, my sister called back furious, screaming that our whole family was intervening on her online work. I reminded her she should have thought twice before insulting my wife, then I hung up again. It's been a few days, and part of me still wants to go nuclear, though, honestly, maybe just telling her off was enough. Am I the bad? Sometimes, secrets have a way of unraveling everything you thought you knew. Next, we've got a story where boundaries get stretched so far, it starts to threaten a marriage. And when patience finally snaps, well, you'll want to hear what happens next. I told my wife's friend to find her own husband, and it blew up. My wife and I have been married for 8 years, and long before we tied the knot, I've known Natalie for about 11 years now. Lately I've had this nagging feeling that Natalie's got a crush on me, even though I've always seen her strictly as a friend. I've never loved the idea of their close bond, but I trust my wife completely and know I'd never betray her. About a year ago, Natalie moved into our neighborhood and started leaning on me for all sorts of favors. She lives by herself, so whenever something in her house broke, she'd hit me up to fix it. Her water heater went out? Natalie called me. She couldn't figure out her new TV? Natalie called me. The trees in her yard needed trimming? Natalie called me again. You get the picture. On top of that, we work near each other downtown, so a few times a week she asks for a ride when she'd rather not drive herself. She's even started dropping by our place without warning when she's feeling lonely or stressed. At this point, she leans on me for emotional support around the clock. I've tried to be patient and respect their friendship, but recently I've been feeling like Natalie is overshadowing my marriage. The breaking point happened just yesterday. I'm a nurse, so I've been pulling insane shifts at the hospital lately. Yesterday was my first true day off in weeks, and I was really looking forward to hanging out with my wife. Right after breakfast, my phone buzzed. Natalie texted asking if I could come help her rearrange some furniture because she felt like redecorating. I shot back that I couldn't make it since it was my day off and I was spending it with my wife. 10 minutes later she rang me, saying it would only take an hour and her living room was a disaster zone without me. That's when I lost it. I handed the phone to my wife and told Natalie straight up, he said no, and you need to respect that he's spending today with his wife. When she pushed back, my wife flat out told her, I'm sorry, Natalie, but maybe it's time you found your own husband, and hung up. Natalie was stunned, and according to my wife, she was furious. I felt bad for Natalie. How would I feel if I were 35, single, and relying on a married friend all the time? But my wife was right, our day together mattered more than her errands. Afterward, I wondered if we'd gone too far. Were we the bad ones here? That evening we cracked open a bottle of wine and talked it through. My wife apologized for being so blunt, and I apologized for not setting boundaries sooner. I promised her she'll always be my top priority, and that I'll make that crystal clear to Natalie from now on. I admitted I should have drawn the line long ago, and that Natalie needs to stop depending on me for everything. We laughed over the mixed messages we read online, rolled our eyes at the wild takes, and agreed it was definitely entertaining. Then I mustered the courage to call Natalie myself. My wife handed me the phone. I said sorry for our harsh words, and then I stepped out so we could talk privately. I didn't hear what they said, but my wife told me Natalie got defensive, insisted she hadn't crossed any line, and accused my wife of being controlling. I stood up for my wife, explained that setting boundaries was my idea, and reminded Natalie I never asked her to stop being friends. They both hung up upset, and now we're waiting to see if Natalie reaches out again in the next few days. All things considered, I still believe protecting my marriage was worth it. What do you think? When boundaries aren't respected, sometimes the only answer is to set them loud and clear. Now imagine flipping the script entirely. When one husband got tired of hearing about his wife's pregnancy struggles, he decided to announce he was pregnant too. Yeah, it didn't go well. I told my wife I was also pregnant. And it blew up our marriage. Hey everyone, I'm posting on the subreddit where I ask if I'm the bad for telling my wife we're both expecting. Did I go too far by claiming I was pregnant too? I know this sounds totally ridiculous, but bear with me. I'm using a throwaway account because my wife browses Reddit and I don't want this popping up in her feed. I'm just looking for some honest opinions. Oh, and by the way, this thread already has 30,000 upvotes. I'm 29, my wife is 30, and since we're in a good place financially, we agreed to try for our fourth child. Every pregnancy so far has turned her into a walking tornado. I can cope with a lot, like being woken up each morning by her vomiting. But when she insists I dash out daily for her cravings or fill a foot soak because her ankles are swollen, my patience wears thin. I pull way longer shifts in a physically demanding job than she does. Anyway, here's the deal. I'm a plumber and she's an engineer, so I figured we were both putting in equal effort for this baby. It's not like I'm slacking off around the house either. She handles the cooking and dishes, while I tackle laundry, take out the trash, and mow the lawn. We even pay someone to clean the floors and bathrooms every week. My mother-in-law drops by to watch the kids because she thinks I'm worthless. I've been meaning to post about how frustrating her visits can be. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the help, but I'm tired of her constant criticism. Wanting just 1 hour of video games a day instead of cleaning up after everyone doesn't make me useless. Everything hit the fan yesterday when my wife yelled from the kitchen for me to get off my butt and distract our toddler twins so she could finish her meatloaf. I cracked a stupid joke about it being the third meatloaf of the week, and she absolutely lost it. She accused me of having zero sympathy for her pregnancy. According to her, I owe her more help since I obviously can't breastfeed. That's when I pointed out that I still work far more hours than she does, so, in my book, we're both pretty much pregnant together. After that, she went stone silent and has only talked to me about the kids since. I'm not convinced I'm in the wrong, but I'll say sorry if it keeps the peace. So, Reddit, am I the bad here? Sometimes, trying to make a point just makes things worse. When communication breaks down, even a joke can become the final straw. And finally, we wrap up with a story of rebellion and self-discovery. When control is taken too far, sometimes the only answer is to let it all go. They took all my clothes, you won't believe why I refused to take them back. My parents punished me by taking away almost my entire wardrobe, and I told them I had no interest in getting it back since it never truly felt like mine. I ran into trouble at school this fall semester. I'm currently a junior in high school. Once, after classes, I snuck off into the woods with a guy and smoked something that was forbidden, and we got caught. We also made out a few times, and my parents ended up finding out about that, too. As a consequence, they stripped me of a lot of my personal belongings. They left me with just 3 pairs of plain jeans, 3 simple black shirts, and my coat. Everything else, my makeup, hair products, purses, and shoes, was gone. They said I'd have to earn everything back by showing good behavior. Until then, I wasn't allowed to enjoy my passion for fashion. At first, those months were rough, but I gradually had a couple of realizations. It turned out to be kind of liberating not having to stress over what to wear or how I looked. My friends were aware of what happened and didn't judge me for it. Whenever someone asked why I seemed to rotate the same outfit, I just explained the situation and everyone was cool about it. What was clearly meant to embarrass me ended up making my parents look unreasonable when everyone at school knew I could only wear one set of clothes. I realized I didn't want possessions that someone else could use to control or punish me. So I decided I didn't even want my old clothes and makeup back. If I was going to dive back into that world, I wanted to do it on my own terms. I planned to buy my own things instead. Then I told my parents I genuinely didn't care if they kept everything. They'd made it obvious that those items weren't truly mine. I explained that it felt uncomfortable to wear clothes that weren't mine, like being at someone else's mercy. Clothes that can be handed out and taken away at their whim felt wrong to me. I'd feel gross wearing them, so I'd rather leave them in the attic forever. Now my parents are upset because there's a mountain of clothes boxed up in the attic, items the family paid for that are just going to waste. No one else can wear them. My mom isn't my size and my only sibling is my younger brother. I told them again that I don't care. I want clothes that I've chosen and paid for myself, not someone else's hand-me-downs. Am I the bad for refusing to take back my old clothes and letting them sit unused? Whether it's standing your ground, protecting your peace, or saying what you really feel, today's stories showed us that sometimes the hardest choices are the right ones. Let me know which one got to you the most in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.